Mr. Kegan Clark is a PhD student in higher education administration at Texas A&M University and works full-time as the program coordinator for the university honors first year experience. He is the instructor of record for UGST 181 honors family meeting, which emphasizes personal, professional, and intellectual development of university honors freshmen through written reflections and high-impact practices. Mr. Clark's engagement with generative AI began in 2023 when he first started utilizing generative AI tools to enhance UGST 181's syllabus, lessons plans, and assignments. Students in UGST 181 are encouraged to utilize generative AI as a tool in the reflective process, provided that they are transparent, engage intellectually, and reflect critically on its usage. Kegan, you can start the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Armando. So I appreciate your introduction today. I'm going to go a little bit over that again, talk about what the University Honors First Year Experience is, because I think that's important to understanding how I use generative AI in the University Honors First Year Experience. And then also like what I've seen be successful, challenges, and then some takeaways. So first off, as you mentioned, I have a Master's in Higher Education Student Affairs, and I'm Program Coordinator for University Honors. I'm also facilitating the AI learning community for the Center for Teaching Excellence this semester, really enjoying that. My experience with generative AI started with just using generative AI to teach myself how to use generative AI. And that was because I figured if I didn't learn how to use it, the students would outsmart me with it. And then I got really fascinated by it, and turns out I actually really like it. So I attended a lot of professional development programs last year. So most of the Hear from Peers that we had last year, and some from this year. I attended the Teaching and Learning with Generative AI conference in Orlando, Florida, and I wrote a policy brief for my graduate class for higher education administration. I'm also presenting to the faculty in education next week, doing manager minutes next week, and then I'll travel to Kansas City for the National Collegiate Honors Council Conference on October 30th through the November 3rd and present there on this as well. So the University Honors First Year Experience, I wanted to kind of explain it in case you're not familiar with it. It involves three main pieces. We have an honors housing community, the honors housing community student leaders, and a class, UGST 181, the honors family meeting. We always like to say this thing, start with the why. And so our thing with our students is helping them develop personally, professionally, intellectually. And we say that honors family meeting is all about family because we divide the students into small family groups with one peer mentor to about 14 freshmen. So the honors housing community is a low stakes opportunity to learn and grow. It's a living learning community on campus. It's housed in Lechner and McFadden halls. It has it's co-curricular to our UGST 181 class. And then the classes within that UGST 181 are divided into small sections where each of these lovely young people lead a small family. So like I said, about 14 freshmen and one sophomore, and they lead them through like weekly discussions. They plan events for them. All of these students are honors housing community student leaders, which we call sophomore advisors and junior advisors. They are former participants in the housing community, and they come back and they lead the class, and then they also lead events and all other sorts of things. They live in the dorms of the students, so they're really great all-around peer mentors right there for those students. So our UGST 181 class, if my slides will go forward, there we go. It's a 0 credit hour required course for the students and freshman students in university honors. It's a pass-fail class, so no grade impact there. It's weekly small discussions led by those sophomore advisors, and then some assignments. And this is why I say I'm the instructor of record, is because I don't know that I necessarily teach the freshmen so much as I sort of set the framework for which they're developing over this first year. And so it is actually a lot of writing. I've had some of my students come in and tell me this is the hardest class they have, and it's a 0 credit hour class. And I'm totally okay with that because they're university honor students, and I want them to be prepared for whatever they're going to go out and do in the future. And everything in this class is about them, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So there's some major assignments we have them do, such as making an e-portfolio, where they basically, it's a 3-dimensional resume talking about who they are, what they value, and what they want to do about it. There's also an annotated bibliography they have to do, and that goes through multiple stages of like a peer review, a revision, doing an elevator pitch that's less than 60 seconds. And then they also have to write a personal statement throughout the spring semester. They're going to repeat a similar process in terms of like revising and peer editing and being able to present that quickly and articulate who they are and their values. We also have several high impact experiences we have them go to. So this thing called Success on Sundays, which is picture here. We have a panel of really successful former students that come and talk to our students and give advice. And then there's small round tables and ice cream, which is why we call it Success on Sundays. And then we also have them go to the Undergraduate Research Expo in the fall and the University Research Scholars Symposium in the spring, so they can get that input and get linked into doing research here at our institution. The course, UGST 181, goes along a development arc through the entire year, going from basically values discernment to vision planning to personal presentation. And so that's why the assignments that we have are sort of structured to build on that throughout the semester. And the way the weekly classes work is we base it on Kolb's cycle of learning. So basically, students will come to class, they'll have a discussion, they'll go back and they'll have an assignment where they have to think about it like a reflection prompt. They'll write their concrete thoughts down and kind of submit the assignment. And then when they go back to class, they sort of follow up on that discussion and build into the next one. So it's a cyclical process that we do across the weeks. These are our course objectives. So again, helping them articulate those core values, those long-term goals, explaining how the academic and co-curricular choices will help them pursue their goals. And so that is the overview of the FYES, which I feel like will be important for understanding what I've done with generative AI. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I realized a lot of the usage I've done with generative AI has actually been my own and less of having the students use it. So I've used it in 3 major areas: course design and development, administrative support, and then, of course, having the students attempt to engage with it. So things that I've done are like developing syllabus statements, content for my Canvas web pages, like assignment guidelines, why we use Google Drive, weekly lesson summaries. So if I have like a lesson plan, I might put it in a ChatGPT and say, give me a weekly lesson summary that then I can copy and paste into the beginning module in Canvas. And that way it's, really easy. I can make sure it's accurate, but I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it doing that. I use it heavily to refine our reflection prompts, and I'll detail that a little bit more later in the presentation. I use it to help me brainstorm for PowerPoints, and then occasionally it'll be used for creating images for PowerPoint or Canvas. So an example of that course content, this is in my syllabus. It's changed since the one that I had from last year because I was attempting to soften my stance, and I think I have to soften it even more than this because I'm trying to find that line between I want the students to use this tool, but I also want them to use it ethically and effectively, and that has been the major challenge. And so the 3 main pillars I have are that transparency, the use at an intellectual level, and critical reflection. And so if they are being transparent about the usage, I'm going to have a conversation with them about how to meet those objectives. If they're not being transparent, like they're trying to hide it from me, I figure that's just academic integrity, and I want to be clear about that's not going to be tolerated. So I use it for a lot of administrative support as well. So I've used it for creating and organizing an annual plan, developing an event planning packet and guidelines, which has really helped with our event planning, updating role descriptions for the sophomores and juniors and my student positions, memos and letters of recommendations. I'll show an example of that later. And then also training materials for the peer mentors, which I'll show an example of. So as far as students actually using generative AI in the class, this is the meme that I showed them when we were having class, because I want them to use it, but they need to be transparent, they need to engage intellectually, and they need to reflect critically. And I don't want them to just outsource that thinking as I've seen them do in the past. So when they are writing their weekly reflections that we ask them to write, I will often include examples of prompts they might put into a generative AI to help stimulate their thinking. Figured these are useful in terms of like, how do I engage with this thing if I'm just taking a 1 snippet prompt and putting it in there? And so for their first journal they write called Who Am I? They're talking about who they are, what their values are, where they come from. So I asked them to, maybe if they're using generative AI, consider some of these prompts like, if the AI has read their journal, what advice does it have? What are some examples of diverse hobbies or interests that can contribute to being a well-rounded college student? We also asked them to reflect on success strategies. So what are their values and how does that help them define success to them? And so these are some other prompts that I have. I will say I have found that this doesn't necessarily work super well. So as much as I've tried to use this to productively incorporate generative AI into the class, I have not seen it used the way I would have hoped it would have been used. I've definitely seen students just copy paste things in and sort of look at it for a minute, but the actual deep intellectual engagement is not something that I'm seeing them do. And a lot of times the students actually just view it as extra work, which I'll talk about more a little bit later. So what has worked? The fun stuff. So successes, it's been an excellent rubber duck for brainstorming. I'm able to generate better content faster. I can make detailed case studies, which I'll show examples of all of these. update, improve lesson plans. I also use generative AI as a reflective mentor and coach, which was really cool to see this last round of that. And then using Google Drive as an audit trail is sort of my way of making sure the students are doing their own work and able to check that very easily. So what do I mean by AI as a rubber duck? I mean, I like to just talk to it. So if I have ideas or if I'm thinking about things, it's really excellent at just being able to have that conversation with you. So if you want to start anywhere with generative AI, I would definitely say, I have this activity and I'd like to think about new ways to do it. What are your ideas for new ways that I can do this, right? And then it'll spit something out, you evaluate it, and then you go on the conversation from there. So as far as creating content, here's a couple of examples of some things that I've made. So I wanted to make a memorandum of expectations that I could use with students to sort of have like a real world example if some of my student volunteers were not meeting the expectations. So I had ChatGPT help me draft one. And then of course I was modifying it. And I'll say a lot of the things that I'm showing you are not things that just fell out of ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT really is a co-collaborative partner, or generative AI in general is a co-collaborative partner. So while it may be generating some things that I will take, I often rephrase things, or I mix and match things, or sometimes it says it one way that I like, and the next time it says it a different way that I don't like, and but it's got something different, and so I will mix and match all of those things. I also used it to write an excuse letter for my students who are traveling with me to the National Collegiate Honors Council Conference in 2 weeks. I just wanted to say, I'm writing like something formal. I'm writing to inform you this is what's happening. Here's the list of the students that are going. I have this linked onto the approved events calendar so faculty can go and see it. And it just provides a nice, easy, formal way for me to help my students communicate with their faculty that they're traveling with us to the conference. I also used it to make some trainings when I first started. So historically, I ran a tutor training program for a couple of years, and I was an undergraduate tutor that did a lot of training for the other peer tutors. And so I knew what I was looking for in terms of creating training, but the generative AI was so helpful at creating new scenarios that I would have never thought of, ensuring those scenarios were diverse, that they had different perspectives that were represented, different ways of thinking about things, generating questions, all that stuff. And so I feel like this is one key thing where generative AI is really good, is at that just generating content that you can then evaluate and decide whether it's what you want it to be or not. This case study in particular was really interesting because it's not something that I would have necessarily thought of or done myself, but it really sparked a great conversation within my students regarding conflict management and how to help freshmen kind of move through some of these conflicts. And so I appreciate it a lot for being able to help out do that. Another thing that I did, so this is more of a practical application, similar to what I was doing, but let's say you're not training students, right? You're a faculty member, you want to know, how can I use this to help me teach something in my class? So in my higher education program, we learned about academic capitalism, and it was something that was pretty dense, kind of struggle for some students to grasp onto. So I wanted to see how good of a job generative AI could do with that. Now, this is clearly about a year old now, over a year old. So the models have changed, probably improved. But I started out just asking it to explain academic capitalism. It started lining things out. I asked it a few more questions, and then I asked it to make me a case study. So I asked it to write me a 3,000-word case study demonstrating academic capitalism. Let's use Big State University is what I called it. And I gave it all the specifics it needed to sort of round out this case study. It writes out a case study. It was pretty good. I had to tell the generative AI, don't be so rosy, add actual characters, add actual quotes. Okay, great. But we got to this point where I have this, what I consider to be a pretty good case study representing academic capitalism and disruptive innovation. And we've got, characters that are speaking, that have motivations, and it goes through the whole process with them. And I thought that this was really cool as a way to think about oh, I've generated on the fly a case study from a concept. And so then I asked it to, write me example questions, right? So what are some discussion questions the graduate students could use to examine areas of this case study that are about academic capitalism, and which ones are for disruptive innovation? And so now I've got a question pool I can pull from, directly created for this case study that is completely novel for the students. And then I asked it to change it to a community college that has a student body of 2,000 students. So now all of a sudden we've got Sunflower Community College instead of Big State University. Ideas are the same, but the context is different. And then I asked it to write me a fictional brochure for that Sunflower Community College that they might send to students. And it even came up with its own catchphrase, planting seeds for a brighter tomorrow. So that was really cool to see. And again, I think this is a way that some faculty can really have some practical applications of this with different concepts within their class. For me, also, when I came into this job, the lesson plans looked like the thing on the left, where it was, a goal, some brief instructions, and a lot of personal navigating for the sophomore students who were leading the weekly discussions. And so I wanted to try and give them a little bit more support, but they didn't want something that was like, all right, for 5 minutes, do this, for 10 minutes, do this, the basic lesson plan that I think a lot of us as educators know. So I converted the original lesson plans into a much more detailed lesson plan, as you can see on the right, where I actually am talking about intentions, connecting it to the course outcomes. I have a bunch of example discussion questions the students can ask each other. And so really just trying to give them a lot more resources and be a lot more in depth than what the original lesson plan was. I've also used it to improve and update assignments. So as I mentioned, our students make an e-portfolio, and this was the instruction for the e-portfolio last year. I wanted to redo that this year because we didn't get a lot of great e-portfolios out of this assignment because it's pretty vague and the students really didn't put in a lot of effort. So I went through and worked a lot with generative AI and came up with a new assignment. So obviously one that's much more detailed, but e-portfolios that I've seen this semester are light years ahead of what I was seeing last year with the students. And I think it's a lot of because there's more direct instructions and then it's easier for them to do. I also had an extra credit assignment where I asked them to take a long form prompt that I wrote and put it into a generative AI. So it could be Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever. The idea was that it was platform agnostic and that they just copy and paste this long form prompt. It's like 3 pages, so it's pretty long, but it walks the AI through all the steps that it needs to do, gives example questions, and essentially trying to turn the generative AI into a mentor that will lead the students on a reflective journey while they're thinking about how they're going to write their experiences and make their e-portfolio and all of those things. So I asked the students to write a reflection. I pulled a couple of little tidbits out for us because I thought this was really impactful, right? So some of the students, again, may not really ever use generative AI and may just try to be getting extra credit for this assignment. I really like this one that says ChatGPT allowed me to essentially spill my guts to it and help me make sense of the why in my interests in preservation and sustainability. I thought that was really neat because another assignment that I've done where I've asked students to relate their values, the way they spend their time, they found that using generative AI was useful because they didn't feel there was any judgment because AI is not a person. So they could have a more raw and authentic conversation with it than maybe having one with like a peer or a mentor or somebody that maybe you don't want to tell them that you're not spending time the way that you think you should be spending your time. I also asked them, here's some other ones I thought were really good, and especially this last one where the student says that I think the AI can be beneficial in organizing a student's thoughts if used correctly and not simply as an answer service. That being said, this application is not always attainable in the life of a busy college student. Accordingly, if it were used in future assignments, I believe it should be used sparingly so as not to overwhelm the student. So I thought that was really interesting too, because I think this is a good application, but it wouldn't work every week of class, right? It definitely takes time for the students to get in there. And then as I mentioned, I have been using Google Drive this semester, so all my students have their own folder in Google Drive where I've asked them to do all of their work. The reason for this is then if I want to check any of their work, all I have to do is go in, look in the Google Drive, and I can see the version history for all of their work. And I think this answers one of those major faculty questions about, how do I tell if it's a student's work or somebody else's work, right? You'll be able to see very quickly if they've just copy and pasted something in. They do still have to download it and upload it to Canvas. I could not find a way to allow them to submit it directly from Google Drive to Canvas. I think they discontinued that functionality, but I have them upload it as a Word document to Canvas, so I also run it through Turnitin. So what's been challenging, right? So that was fun. Those were successes, yay. The challenges that I found in trying to do this is that step one, without any guidance, students use AI at a very basic level. They just say, hey, I would like you to write me this and write it like this and change that and add this and okay, great, copy paste, done. And that's not really, to me, I think, the way AI has the ability to amplify those human abilities that we have. For us as a 0 credit hour seminar class, I don't have any time to teach them how to use the generative AI without sacrificing other course content. I'm sure other faculty, even if you have longer classes, are probably in the same boat, right? Like, how do I teach them to use this without sacrificing something else I need to be talking about in the course? And I'm thinking about my spring semester and wanting to integrate this more, but I'm like, okay, how can I do that and keep the content, but then still teach them new content, right? It's very difficult. I've also found that the students won't use the AI if they view it as more work. If they have to write an additional paragraph, even though they got to use the AI, they're like, I might as well just write the reflection myself anyways. So it has to be some sort of benefit for them. And it's got really limited impact if it's not done intentionally. So even though I had those prompts for them to use, that didn't necessarily have the impact I was hoping for them, because there wasn't a lot of intentional usage and feedback and really in that educational process. I also think that it's impossible to catch improper usage of generative AI if students put in enough effort. I've had students talk to me about how they will use multiple AIs so that way they can make it sound as human as possible or whatever. And because it's totally new and generated, it's really, you're not going to know that this has happened. And so that's why I like my Google Drive solution, although you also balancing there, how do I encourage them to use this thing without making them so scared of academic integrity violations that they don't use it at all, which I've also had happen. So almost done. Takeaways that I wanted to have today were really just beyond allowing your students to use AI. I think that you have to teach it. You have to teach them how to use it effectively for whatever it is that you are teaching them. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And while there's some examples of things that might be transferable or work across domains, I think a lot of it is going to be up to the individual faculty member to sort of use that AI as rubber duck and say, I'm teaching this. What can we do together, right? How can I do this? And generative AI is great at giving you some examples for that. I think you also have to be very intentional with how you're identifying how and why you're using the AI. Like, what is the value that is coming from incorporating the AI? Because if we're just using it to use it, that I haven't found that to be useful, even if I would like it to be. And then AI can help even if it's not actively incorporated in the class, because you can have students, like I said, with that case study piece where it's like, I'm struggling to understand this idea. Help me understand it. Give me different examples. You can have the same content, but generate new, novel, different examples. For me personally, I would like to, again, focus more on how to use AI for the students. So how do I teach them to prompt it? How do I teach them to evaluate what it's giving them? And how do I teach them to combine what their special abilities are and what the AI is able to amplify for them to create the best products possible, right? Because for me, it's about that outcome that I think is the most important. I want to have a semester-long process that focuses on the AI. So, something where they start, then they use AI, then we get feedback on that, and then they keep doing it. And so that way it feels like a reflexive process and more of that co-collaborator, right? Instead of something that replaces them. And then I also have to, for myself, find a better way of balancing incorporating generative AI and maintaining academic integrity, because I was really disappointed that one of my students got nothing out of the ePortfolio generative AI assistant extra credit because they were so afraid they might get reported to academic integrity office that they couldn't focus on actually using the AI. And so how do we balance, yes, I want you to use this, but I want you to use it ethically, and how do we find that space, I think is important. And so that's all I have today. I'll open it up for questions.